Good evening. So my question for you this evening is, what language is this? Can you see that? Take a good look at that. What language is that, and where did it come from? That is the question this evening. Now, how did I get off on this question? Well, we're in the month, the seventh month of the original calendar year. Of course, it's not the seventh month; it's the ninth month of our year. But originally, this was considered the seventh month after the first month beginning in spring. So, and this is the month. It's actually called the beginning because it's the beginning of the agricultural year when people start planting their crops. In the ancient world, they would start planting their crops. In Babylonian territory over there in the Mesopotamian region and Syria and all that territory, they would start planting the crops because the rains would come in the winter and rain on everything and bring water, and they would use that to grow their barley. And so their barley would grow during the winter, and then around springtime it would ripen, and they would celebrate that season at that time. So this is called the beginning of the agricultural year. And so in the ancient Babylonian calendar, it's called Tesritu. And the zodiac sign for Tesritu is the scales, what we call the scales of Libra. So now, in Hebrew, the Hebrews, the Jews, they call this month, the Babylonians call it Tesritu, which means the beginning, and the Jews call it Tashria, something. I don't know what they call it, something like that, about around that. So it's similar to Tesritu. If you look at what the Orthodox Jews call this month, it's similar to Tesritu, which is the Babylonian word for the month, which the word for this month is the beginning. The symbol of the month, the constellation is the scales of Libra. Now, in the Bible, there's another word for this month, and that word is Ethanim, which means the beginning. And this is a Phoenician word, ha-ethanim. So you ask yourself, why is the Bible using a Phoenician word? And then when the Jews in around 400 AD decided to seek to purify their religion, they went back to the word, the Babylonian word, Tesritu. Now I don't know how they pronounce their month. It's Tishri. Anywhere, you can look that part up. But it's a lot different than ha-ethanim, the beginning. And then so the holiday that the Jews have on the new moon of Tesritu is Rosh Hashanah, which means the head of the year. So they came up with another name, Rosh Hashanah, for Tesritu, which means the beginning. So Tesritu means the beginning. Then they're calling the month Tishri, which means the beginning. And then they made up a word Rosh Hashanah, which means the head of the year. But in the Bible, see, here's the big difference. In the Bible, in Kings, it's called ha-ethanim. Okay, so I'm going to show you this picture again. What language is this? And where did it come from? See those letters? Where did that come from? When did that appear in the land of Canaan? Now, I was told by all the experts in language in the Encyclopedia Britannica and the Oxford, these people and that people, the Oxford University and Cambridge and all these fancy universities have all told us that this language is the language of the Phoenician Canaanites, and it came out of Canaan because that's where they found it. So of course it would have to come from Canaan because that's where they found it. But the strange part about that, Mr. Professor, is that this language didn't exist before 1100 BC in Canaan. Okay, so just appears in Canaan 1100 BC to 1000 BC. Okay, so obviously the professors don't know the answer to this question. They never even thought about it, and that was the end of that story. So here's what I want to show you. I want to let you know that the reason why in the movie The Ten Commandments they picked that language is because that language is called Proto-Hebrew. Proto-Hebrew and Proto-Aramaic. In other words, that's the language, that alphabet right there, which I'm going to show you again. Well, I'll just show it to you right now. So see this alphabet? They're saying this is Proto-Hebrew and Proto-Aramaic, which is basically Aramaic is what Hebrew, like modern Hebrew, is descended from Aramaic. And they're saying that Aramaic previously was this alphabet here, which they say is Proto-Hebrew. This is Phoenician. That's Phoenician. Okay? The Phoenicians were the sea people, and they came from Europe. So I want to show you something else here, which is I thought was interesting. As you can see, well, here's the Lydian alphabet. It's very similar to the one I just showed you, right? Let me see if I'm going to get this on the screen. Don't worry. This is the Lydian alphabet. They were kind of like where Anatolia, just like the east end of the Greek Empire over there, Anatolia. So the Lydians were over there. The Hittites were there too, and let me just finish one thing at a time here. Do you see those letters? Okay, this is the Lydian alphabet. Do you see this here? These are Germanic runes. Take a good look at that. You'll see some of the runes are the same as the Phoenician letters. Okay, in the Phoenician alphabet, you'll see some of these Germanic runes are the same or similar. Now, here's a good one. This here it says the early Aramaic alphabet, which you can see, and then it says the Imperial Aramaic alphabet, which you can also see, which descended from the early Aramaic. We got the Imperial Aramaic, and then at the bottom here you'll see the Aramaic, the modern version of Aramaic, which is what is basically the same. Is where you get modern Hebrew. The Hebrew of 400 A.D. Okay, which is when it started appearing. When the Jews started using this new language called Hebrew, they got that alphabet from Aramaic, which we're told comes from the Proto-Aramaic, which looks exactly like Phoenician, and shares similarities with the Germanic runes. Now, isn't that weird? Isn't that weird? You've got Germanic runes, what look like Germanic runes on the Ten Commandments. Here's another example. This is Phoenician, and then Aramaic, and then Hebrew. Okay. So Phoenician, Aramaic, and then the bottom one's Hebrew, but the bottom one's really Aramaic, like a more modern Aramaic, which was before the language that you call Hebrew, was the modern Aramaic, and then the Jews of what we call the Dark Ages, right? 400 A.D. 400 A.D. We call those the Dark Ages in Europe. They came up with the language for their religion called Hebrew, which they got from the Aramaic, which we're told comes from the Phoenician, which comes from Europe. It doesn't come from Canaan. The professors were wrong. Oxford was wrong. Cambridge was wrong. Columbia University was wrong. Okay, now let me just show you how obvious it is that that's not the same language. So, God, I have a lot of pieces of paper here. Let me show you something simple, okay? Well, here's just one more. Just one more. So here's another one. Obviously, Proto-Hebrew and Aramaic. Okay, you get the picture, right? And then okay, so let's look at this. Now, this is kind of stupid, but it's kind of interesting too. Is it shows the Egyptian. So now you see it goes. I can't point correctly on this, but you'll see Phoenician to Greek. Let me get this angled correctly. Phoenician to Greek to Roman and Hebrew are the equivalents. What we should really say here is it's Phoenician and Greek and Roman, but it was really Phoenician and Greek and Aramaic and Roman, and then Hebrew came from the Aramaic. That's how that went. Okay. Now, oh, look what it says at the top. It says that Phoenician is Semitic. That's a lie. That's a lie. Well, they just didn't know. What was that one? There was like a Seinfeld episode. If you don't know that you're lying, are you really lying? Well, they thought it was Semitic because they found this language in Canaan, so it must have been Semitic, right? Well, it's not. It's not at all. It's not at all Semitic. The only language that qualifies as Semitic is the Akkadian language of the Babylonians. The Mari race, which we know as the Amorites. That's the only language that is truly Semitic. And the reason why it's the only language that is truly Semitic is because Shem was the sun god of the Babylonian Akkadian race. So they called it Shem. Okay? And Shem is the sun. Well, they called it Shemish, sun, man. See, you've got Hebrew right there. Ish. Ish means man in Hebrew. And if it's before the name Ishtar, then it's a woman, okay? And it's Shem-ish, it's the sun man, and Ishtar is the star lady, okay? She's the beautiful star lady. That's what the Hebrew language, we would call that Hebrew now. It's called Babylonian, it's called Akkadian. So they're the only Semites, would be the Amorite race of the Akkadian, the Babylonian. They had some other dynasties called the Khatna and the Yamhad, something like that. Okay, so here's the thing. So this is Semitic. This is the original Hebrew language. See that? That's Akkadian. That is nothing like those other images I showed you, because it's not related in any way. So frankly, to be honest with you, what we call Hebrew today it comes from this Aramaic, which they used to make their Hebrew, is they used Aramaic, which came from the ancient European language. Now, I keep telling you that, but you're, well, why are you telling that this is European? What do you mean? How do you figure this is from Europe? Well, because where's my piece of paper? I hope I printed this off. A map of the sea invasion. Did I print off the sea invasion map? I hope I did. The sea people invaded. The sea people invaded Europe, dude. Gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen. Did I not print that one off? I can print it off while we're talking, I guess. Yeah, you know what? I think I will. Just to be fair. Otherwise, you won't believe me. So, I'll print that off here while we're chatting, real quick. See people. I want to show you the map. You gotta see the map. So we got C people. Here it is. I'll just print this off, and then I'll show it to you. And while it's printing, I'll show you something else too. Okay. Okay, so here's the thing. This here, what's this? We're going back to this one, okay? Akkadian. See those markings? That's the original language of what we call the Hebrews, the Haparu. First of all, what you need to know is that the Hebrews didn't call themselves Hebrews, okay? They called themselves Shasu tribes, which meant they were nomadic tribes that lived in tents. And they were people that wandered around with their flocks, okay? Now, some of these people, some of these Shasu tribesmen, also engaged in crime. So they would, there's trade routes going from Egypt through the land of Canaan to these other empires, the Hattushan Empire and the Hurrian Empire and the Babylonians. And as they're trying to communicate and send things back and forth between, they're trading between these different territories, these Shasu tribesmen, who were basically acting like land pirates, would attack the trade routes. And they were known as the Haparu because, one, they were dirty because they were living in tents and they were kind of dusty and dirty. You know what I mean? They're running around and living in tents. They're not living in the nice, clean, whatever. They're just kind of out there in the woods. They're all dirty, so they were called the Haparu. Or it could just mean like, you know, it was just kind of a slur, you know, like a curse word, the Haparu. And that's where you get the word Hebrew. So they didn't call themselves Hebrew. But this was their language. If you look back at the Amarna tablets, which are, I think they're mostly around 1400 to 1200 BC, they're written in this cuneiform script. Okay, so here's the Akkadian version. And what you have to know about cuneiform script is it all comes from Sumerian. Okay, this is the first question I asked myself when I read Genesis, and I'm reading the story of Abraham, who we're told he comes from Ur. So I asked myself, well, because people say Abraham was, you know, Jewish. Well, he wasn't. How could he be Jewish if he wasn't Jewish? There were no Jews yet. So what race and language was Abraham? Well, he lived in Ur, and so the language that he used was, you know, probably Sumerian and Babylonian words, because the Babylonian, the Akkadian race kept a lot of the Sumerian words. And so what did that language look like? It looked like this. This is the Sumerian. Now it's really like a mathematical code. Now this language, remember how these retard professors would say, first they started with little animal pictures, and then it evolved into scribbles, and then that turned into writing. Well, does that look like that came from little animal scribbles? No, it's like a mathematical code. It's like a super advanced math code. Okay, and it just appeared around 3000 BC. This highly advanced mathematical code writing just kind of appears in Mesopotamia. Didn't evolve from little rock scribbles like they told you. So that's Sumerian. So the Sumerians had this math code writing system, right? And so then when the first people that they really civilized were these Babylonian race people, the Akkadian race, and so the Akkadians adopted it, and the Aryans came down, both in Hattusha, which is now Anatolia, which is now Turkey, and then more people came down, and they all adopted this. This is a which version is this? This is the Hittite version. So the Hittites were an Indo-European race living in what we call Anatolia. And you could say they were like the Aryans. They were probably closely related to the Aryans. The Aryans are really the Hurrians. They also used the same cuneiform writing system. You can see the Hittite version is a little different because they're a different race and they're a different everything. So, but it's all cuneiform. Here's another one. This is Ugarit. So this is Ugaritic. Ugarit was a city on the coast of Canaan in the north, which got wiped out by the Sea People, the Europeans, when they invaded. And this is the last you would see of this language when the Sea People invaded, because, of course, you ended up with that. That's what they brought with them. They brought this new script. So let me show you what happened. So this is a map of. This is the map I printed off for you, and you can see that this is. I'll try and get a good picture here. This is the map of. It says destruction of Troy, destruction of Ugarit, 1192 to 1175 BC. You can see the Europeans come down. It's a land invasion across Hattusha, across Anatolia. It's a sea invasion of, of Canaan. They land on North Africa and then take all the, they're going across North Africa. So they're just spreading all over the place. This is 1190 to 1170 BC. Okay. 1190 to 1170 BC. When was the United Kingdom of Israel established? 1000 BC. So this is almost close to 200 years before the establishment of the United Kingdom of Israel. You had an invasion from Europe. You had an invasion from Europe. See, this is why they got it wrong. They didn't know, or I don't know. I mean, I've read these encyclopedias, and they say the Sea People invaded and they attacked the land of. They attacked the Egyptians and blah. And that was in the around they give the year around 1200 1190 BC, and they were never seen again. That's what the encyclopedia says, and they were never seen again. They were never seen again. They were never seen again. They were never seen again, huh? You ever heard of the Roman Empire? Have you ever heard of Alexander the Great? Have you heard of the British Empire? Have you heard of the American Empire? I think they were seen again. That's what I'm trying to tell you. Okay, I got a lot of pieces of paper here now. So what am I trying to tell you here? What I'm saying is, okay, the Amarna tablets, which are written around 1400 to probably 1200 BC, talk about the Haparu, okay? All in Egypt and all these different countries and territories in the Middle East, and the Aryans, the Babylonians, the Assyrians, they're all writing in this cuneiform script. And they're talking about the Haparu or attacking things, and these Haparu are they're worshiping these pagan deities and these different temples, and it's talked about in there. There's nothing about the God of Israel. It's not mentioned anywhere in any of these old writings. Okay, and there's no record of any of this stuff in these ancient cuneiform records. In fact, all the cuneiform records show is that all these Hebrews and all these other races were all worshiping these many gods that had come from Mesopotamia, unless they were Egyptian. So what am I trying to say here? In case you missed it, what I'm saying is, do you see this? The Ten Commandments. They picked this alphabet on purpose because that's what we think of. That's what we're calling Proto-Hebrew. The Hebrews, the Hebrew language, okay, modern Hebrew, was based on this Proto-Hebrew, which is Phoenician, which is the language of the Sea People. And here, this is what I'm trying to tell you. Do you see that these are Germanic runes? You see those Germanic runes? Do you see that? You can see that some of them are very similar to the writing on the Ten Commandments that's supposedly Hebrew. So like, okay, this is all very confusing, right? What it looks like to me is that around 1190 to 1170 BC, the Middle East, the land of Canaan, North Africa, all these territories were attacked and invaded, and some of them completely conquered, and others not conquered, by these Europeans. They definitely took the north of Hattusha and all that. So here's what gets it a little complicated too. The people who were there before the Europeans invaded, they were, God, this is annoying. The people that were there before the Europeans invaded were called the Aryans. Okay, these are people who were called the Aryans. They weren't the Babylonian race though. So it really goes as far as the people that controlled, Canaan and this whole territory. It was really first. It was like this Mari race, the Amuru, the Mari race, which is also the same race as the Babylonians. This would be the Akkadian-speaking people, and they had this language, which is this cuneiform language. Okay, the Aryans come down around 1500 BC because the Mari race had kind of blossomed and was kind of falling and deteriorating. So, whereas they were already the Hyksos by this time of Egypt. So they're forced out of Egypt, and they're losing all the territory in the north, and they're just becoming they're kind of disintegrating as a race into small pockets of, territories, right? In Canaan and around, they're just kind of losing all their ground to all these new people. The Egyptians retake Canaan, and so now they're under Egyptian rule, and the Aryans come down and take all of Syria and take all of, all the northern part of the Mesopotamian region, leaving some of it to the people in the southern part of the Mesopotamian region. But they're all using this language, which is this cuneiform code, which they got from the Sumerians. Then, around this time of the invasion of the Sea People, Europe takes all of Hattusha, where the Hittites are. They take Syria. They come down into Canaan. They've, the Philistines were part of this group, and they take Gaza, and they hold that territory. And the languages, now, they must have taken a lot because the language is all over the land of Canaan. So they must have taken a lot of that territory. And they start identifying themselves as the Hebrews or with these other tribes. I doubt they killed everybody. They probably took their women, had babies, and the women are like, "This is how we do things here." And they made them, they just kind of became part of the culture there. And of course, they're calling themselves these other people. And when they go to trace back their history, they're saying that they came from the east because their culture came from the east. It came from Samaria. It came from this Babylonian culture. And it had been that way for, thousands of years. And so now these new people are living there, and they're calling themselves whatever they're calling themselves. And they're identifying with these old other races that had been there before them, which they appeared to have conquered. Now, Josephus writes about the conquering of these other races and how they disappeared. And he seems to believe that he's one similar racially to these Greeks and Romans. Okay? But if you read the Bible, which he's talking about, it's about how Joshua came up out of Egypt and he conquered all these territories. And it's an interesting story. But when you actually read Joshua, it's pretty obvious that this is just a myth. It's mythology. It's the ark goes before and it does the battling for them, and they just have to believe. In other words, it's part of the religious story. So, but the question is, where did these people really go? Were they conquered by Joshua crossing the Jordan, or were they invaded by Europe? And it seems that they were invaded by Europe. That's what seems to have happened. This is totally revolutionary to think this way because no one has considered it this way before. And so that's what we're doing here. Um, and the reason we're doing that here is because, one, because we have a map of the invasion, and we have a time of the invasion happening before the founding of the United Kingdom of Israel. We have what look like Germanic runes on the Ten Commandments. I mean, they're not exactly the same, but they're similar. Some of the letters look really similar. But, what happens is people are different areas. They start accentuating different letters, and they start adding letters and making different letters. So the languages are constantly evolving. They don't stay in a static state. And so this is... So when Josephus is relaying his history, he's talking about how these different races that used to live in Canaan were all wiped out. And Josephus seems to have the idea that he is racially similar to the Greeks and to the Romans, but he thinks that his history comes from Mesopotamia, which is Babylonian. So do you see how confused the history got there? That's what happened. It got confused. It got mixed up between a lot of different people, and people started identifying with these other cultures and races, and then they said, well, our history came from the East, when really it looks like maybe it came from the West. Okay, because look, I'm just see this here. It says early Aramaic alphabet, which is of course this Phoenician Sea People alphabet, which shares many letters that appear to look like Germanic runes to me. And then then you have what's called the Imperial Aramaic alphabet, which was adopted by the Achaemenid Empire, which is the Persian Empire, which also used to use the cuneiform. See, everybody used the cuneiform. Now they're using this language, which came from Europe, appears to have come from Europe. They all adopted this language that came from Europe. And then on the bottom, you can see it's the Aramaic, the square script for Aramaic. So they had a squared version, which is what the Hebrew, the Jews, let's call them the Jews, of the after Christianity Jews. Okay, the Pharisees who were part of the Roman Empire and rejected it and said we're gonna go back to our roots. We want to go back to our roots. We want to have our own religion. We're going to be separate from you. That's what Pharisee means. We want to remain separate from you. We're going to go back to our old language, and that language that they went back to make their alphabet, the Hebrew alphabet, the modern Hebrew alphabet, they used Aramaic. They used the squared version of Aramaic, which comes from apparently the Phoenician, which comes from Europe. If they really wanted to purify it, they'd use the Akkadian cuneiform script, which they got from the Sumerians. That would be the purest possible form of language. That would be the purest. You can already see it when the modern Jews decided to call it Rosh Hashanah instead of Ethanim, because Ethanim is a Phoenician word. It's not native to that territory. That's what I'm trying to say. Now, here's the other weird part of the story. I'll end off on this. I'm sure I could just go on and on about this for hours, but I won't. The other strange part of the story is when you read Genesis, it goes on about these kings of there's these kings of Edom. What are their names? The kings of Edom. What are their names? Who are the kings of Edom? Yeah, that's what it is. One is. Okay, here we go. The kings of Edom. Ooh, look at this. Samiyahu, Shaul, and Baal Hanan Akbar. Those are the ones that I find interesting, particularly Samiyahu and Shaul. Saul and Samuel. Right? Saul, because in the Bible, isn't it goes Samuel is the high priest that anoints Saul, right? Isn't that how it works? Is that correct? Let me look. Let me make sure I'm not Saul, king of Israel. Right. Saul is the king. He's the first king of Israel, and he is anointed by Samuel. Samiyahu El. Samiyahu El. So here, this is just this. This is just an amazing story. It seems to me that the kings listed as the kings of Edom were then the what they used to write the story of the ancient history of the ancient Israelite kingdom. They used the kings of Edom, and apparently the kings of Edom used the word Yahoo. So those were the original Yahuwites, the original Yahuwites. They're using the name Yahoo. They're also using the name Hadad, which is Hadad is a storm god. Is it a Babylonian storm god or an Aryan storm god? Let me check. Hadad. Let's look real quick. Baghdad. Hadad, god. It says here. Was this okay? Hadad was an Ugaritic Hadad. Sumerian was storm rain god of the Canaanite and Mesopotamian. Okay. Equivalent of Baal. Okay. So they're using Hadad, the name Hadad. They're also using Samiyahu, which means that the kings of Edom were the original Yahuwites that had a kingdom. And then when they rewrote this story later, in the Phoenician race, the Sea People race that came in and wiped them out, and they kept their history going. They had these writings, and they rewrote them as being this new race that came apparently from Europe, or at least partially. They mixed with this race from Europe. I don't know. I mean, I can't tell you exactly. This is all very new. Of an idea of a new look on how this happened. But it appears that they took these people, these Edomite kings, Samiyahu, Shaul, that's Saul. And then the third one in line would have been Baal Hanan Akbar, which now Akbar came to mean the great in the Muslim religion. But it could have been King David, was modeled after this Baal Hanan. Now, Hanan is Canaan. Baal Canaan, son of Akbar. Okay, so King Baal Hanan. So he's named after the god of Canaan, Baal Hanan, and Akbar is the son of Akbar. So that means, we don't know what that means, but that's what he was named. That could be he could be the model that they made King David out of. I think that story of the kings of Israel, based on what I'm looking at here, is a Sea People European version of an older, originally Yahuwite story of the kings of Edom. And we can see that the language, quite frankly, was Phoenician. That's what we're calling Proto-Hebrew. It was a language that had nothing to do with the Hebrews. Zero. This is not Hebrew. It's called Proto-Hebrew. It had nothing at all to do with the Hebrews. Nothing. The Hebrews used that cuneiform code. It has nothing to do with the Hebrews. But they adopted this language, so I guess it does have something to do with them, because they adopted this language that came from Europe. So what I'm saying here is, what's the original Hebrew? The original Hebrew is the cuneiform code, the mathematical cuneiform code that came from the Sumerians and then was adopted by the Hittites and the Assyrians and the Akkadian Babylonian race, and the Egyptians used it for commerce because it was like the code language of commerce for all the different empires. The Sea People come in from Europe. A land invasion in the north and a sea invasion across North Africa and into Canaan, and they take some of the territory and reside permanently in it. And those are the people that are then wiped out by the Assyrians later on, and by the Babylonians, and taken back to Babylon. You know the story of these tribes, and they're dispersed, or they're lost tribes, or some of them are taken from there and they're brought back to Babylon. That's who they were. They were probably Europeans that were just like totally totally lost their land there, and they didn't, they were there. Now they're going to Babylon. So anyway, pretty convoluted piece of history, but interesting, and I just think we should understand it more clearly, and not because it's a confusing portion of history. The thing that makes it confusing is you have a lot of different races and a lot of different languages all immersed in the same small territory, and then you had a big religion come out of there. As far as the religious angle goes, it looks to me like from the time that Yamoses purged the Hyksos from power. Now that doesn't mean that all the Canaanitic people left. They just purged the power. They purged the group of power, and then now the Egyptian royal family runs it. Okay, from that point on, that seems to be where Josephus as well points to as the time of the Exodus or whatever. I don't know. But it may be around that time, because those Canaanite pharaohs, or those Hyksos pharaohs, would have had the secrets of the Egyptian religion. And then they squirreled it away. And went back to the land of Canaan. Right? So that's how it occurred. Because there is Egyptian religion that they squirreled away. A squirrel, like a squirrel, he like gets food into his mouth, and he like goes and he hides it. Right? They squirreled away some of this religion that they got from Egypt and started a new religion. Because the thing about it, just leading up to this point, around the same time, when you had Chancellor Bey, in around 1192, I believe he was killed, somewhere around there. You'll have to look it up. Because they didn't want to worship the Egyptian gods. They were of Hurrian descent, they're called, or from that territory in Syria. They were Canaanite, Hurrian. This other race is now living in Egypt. They don't want to worship the Egyptian gods because you kind of feel like I'm worshiping foreign gods. So they came up with their own religion, based in a great deal based on this Egyptian archetype, because that was powerful to them. This Egyptian religion was very powerful, and it was based on natural law, so there was a lot of truth to it. They came up with their own version with this creator god that's coming out of Egypt. They've got the ark, and they've got the commandments, and they built this whole new religion where they're not going to worship any foreign gods, and that was the religious angle of it. And maybe that religion started before the Sea People, and the Sea People took it over. I don't know.